our player of the day, Heather Butt, so we could player profile of. We want to try and do this series while we have a little bit of downtime. I'm looking forward to introducing everybody to everybody outside of the poker realm and what they do in their day job. And Heather has a very, very specific skill set that actually applies right to what our current state of what's going on. So, Heather, without further ado, why don't you introduce yourselves to everybody? And I'm going to be answering some questions on the side as well as this goes.
Okay, hi Tom. So thanks for inviting me on. I think most of you don't know what I do in my real life, so now you get to hear about it. So I am a public health lawyer, public health attorney, and I'm a professor. So just by way of a little bit of information, I my educational background. I did my undergraduate work at Princeton University. I was a history major, and my focus was Afro-Am and African Studies. From there, I went to law school, and I went to St. John's University School of Law in Queens with a focus on healthcare. From there, I actually went to Harvard University, and I got my master's in public health, which is uh, quite timely for what we're going to talk about today. So my focus at Harvard was law and public health, and then from there I got my teaching degree at Columbia University Teachers College with a focus on adolescent psychology and online education and training with a sort of sub minor in media and communications. Currently, I'm a professor and I teach bioethics, I teach healthcare administration, and for our purposes today, I teach public health law. That's what I do. So I'm deeply entrenched in the world of epidemiology, of biostatistics, the interface of public health and law, and the interface of outbreaks, epidemics, pandemics. That is what I do for a living.
That's pretty amazing. I personally had no idea that that's what as deep as it went. I knew a professor and law and health, but I didn't know how deep it went. And it's very interesting all of your educational background.
I like school. I started Princeton actually when I was 16, so I went there pretty young, and then went to law school when I was 20.
That is amazing. All right, so tell us a little bit more about you before we get into all of this current state of events.
Sure. I mean, the big part about me is I work a lot, and I am very interested in issues regarding healthcare, and I'm also interested in issues regarding the intersection of law and public health. I run a nonprofit that is a youth nonprofit on Staten Island, and it's very near and dear to my heart. And I've been running it for 11 years. And I was telling Tom offline, sadly, my parents passed away last year. My dad passed away about 12 months ago. My mom passed away about 9 months ago. And I was telling him that uh, down to the felt was a big way of me kind of getting through that and being able to leave some of the sad days behind me when they were happening. And so I'm really grateful to everybody in the league who I think maybe only one or two people knew that. I'm really grateful to this league because when there were days when I kind of just didn't want to even get out of bed, uh, being able to know that in the end of that day I could go and play poker was decently
I
helpful for
truly,
me.
I really
That's
appreciate
a
that.
big understatement.
I'm happy that
Oh,
we
and I
were
want
able
to
to
thank
make a
you too,
positive
Tom,
impact.
for yeah, you really been you're wonderful. You're a great human being. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate what you do for people in this league,
I
and
appreciate you, Heather. It's not about
you're
me. I
gonna
want
come
to
out
know
on the
more
other
about
side.
you, though. I
Oh,
definitely
about
want.
me?
Yeah, absolutely. put us on to more than just the educational background and everything. Like, tell us more about you, what you're into, what you like. We want to know all about that too.
Oh, okay. So I'm from Queens, New York, which is where I'm sitting now, and I obviously I like cards. In addition to that, I'm an avid reader, so I like to read a lot. I love gardening. I know this will probably come as a surprise to a lot of people in the league, but I'm a decently deep introvert. So I
I
like
would
to
not
keep
have
things.
guessed that for sure.
I know I'm pretty hardcore introverted. And so I like to do a lot of
No,
things that introverted people like to do. I know you're shaking your head, but it's
there's no
totally
way.
true. So I like to do quiet things with quiet people.
No one's accusing you of being quiet at the poker table.
I know. But I am an introvert actually. So when I'm not being my best card playing self, I do a lot of just sort of more quieter things like reading. I have to do a lot of reading for my work. So I do a lot of. I like do a lot of that. I do a lot of trying to keep up to date on issues regarding public health. Obviously, I'm glad I've been doing that for purposes of what's currently going on.
I definitely want to get your
And
take on everything that's going on now too, especially because this is your specialty and what you're like. I don't know if everybody saw the beginning of this, but you do have a very long resume of being somebody that is an expert in this field, or like this is what you do. So tell us more about what you think of everything, of the state of current events.
sure, so I've been following epidemics, and I guess we should get some definitions going because Tom, you and I were talking about this, how people kind of are using some terms interchangeably, and so maybe we can just get a couple of definitions going. All right, so the first term I've heard used a lot that sort of interchangeably is quarantine versus isolation. And so the difference between those two terms is that a quarantine happens when you have been exposed to a disease, a contagious disease, but you are not ill and you are not exhibiting signs of the illness. Isolation is when you are ill. So when you are under isolation or you are ordered to be under isolation, you are actually ill and you are exhibiting signs of the disease. Another set of terms that I've heard kind of used interchangeably are outbreak versus epidemic versus pandemic. And I would say that this whole episode took a turn when the World Health Organization declared that this was a pandemic. But it was a pandemic long before they declared it because a pandemic essentially means you have a disease that is happening in a greater rate than you would normally expect that disease to happen in multiple countries, in usually on multiple continents. And I don't think there's uh, this. I don't think that this pandemic is in Antarctica, but other than that, it's on every other continent.
It's
So that
getting
makes it a
everywhere.
pandemic. So those are just two terms, and I mean we don't have to get into the sort of the minutia of a communicable disease versus a contagion. That we don't have to get to that, but I just wanted to clear up those two terms. So I am keenly interested in issues regarding epidemiology, and epidemiology at its very most basic is the spread of a disease over time. So when we think about epidemiology, and I think the best example that we can think of in semi-modern times, I'm a history person, so I think in hundreds of years, but in semi-modern times is the flu pandemic of 1918.
That was a Spanish
And
flu,
when,
right?
when we think about that, which is almost exactly 100 years ago, we can think about that in terms of a pandemic. 500 million people in the world were affected, were ill, and uh, millions and millions of people died. So about a third of the world's population was actually impacted, as in they were ill from that, which was a form of H1N1, which I think people maybe don't know. But that's an example of a pandemic over time that was throughout the world. And so when I think about it from a historical perspective, the thing that I've been interested in for the last 5 or 6 years is Ebola. And that was something that could have been something of a wake up call for us. It was not, unfortunately. And so we find ourselves now in a situation where we have a pandemic and we are differently situated in terms of how ready we are for it.
Do you feel this is more of an issue, not necessarily the severity of the virus, but of the healthcare system, the way it's set up?
That is a great question. I, in addition to just looking generally at disease processes and things like epidemics and pandemics, my more nuanced focus is on health systems. And oftentimes I start out my public health law class asking students what's the definition of healthcare. That's not such an easy thing to come up with, by the way. If you asked everybody in the league what's the definition of healthcare, you would have several hundred different definitions. So everybody doesn't necessarily agree as to what the definition of healthcare is. But one thing I think we can all probably agree on is that healthcare has something to do with how your body functions both at a mental and physical level, and it also has to do with systems. And so, one of the reasons why we've been told repeatedly to stay in our homes or not go outside as much is because, and I'm sure everybody's heard this term, flatten the curve, right? And the reason why we want to do that is not only because we don't want to infect other people, we don't want to get infected, but also because since our healthcare system runs at a very high rate of overload already, and anybody who's been in an ER in the last 20 or 30 years knows that when you walk into an ER, you see lots of people lying on gurneys in hallways, which tells you that most hospitals on any given night run at probably over 100% of capacity,
Wow, I didn't know
101%,
that.
102%. So if you figure our healthcare system is already decently maxed out, adding several thousand people or more than several thousand people to that mix will be decently problematic. And so the flattening of the curve that you've heard people talk about has to basically do with making more equality regarding the rates of the disease and the rates that people get the disease, so that instead of having spikes or having a spike, you have more of a flattened sort of like roll, so that the healthcare system as we know it can more easily absorb the cases that come in over time, which goes back to my epidemiology definition that I was talking about.
Taking this into account, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, it's just a flu. The regular flu kills more people than this." What is your take on that?
Well, so far the numbers are not exactly bearing that out. Now, this is the problem because I'm apolitical in terms of what I do for a living, and I think most people in the league would probably say that I'm decently apolitical when they meet me. They're hopefully people don't really know what my political views are, and
Unlike
I
Ryan, who is totally biased on one side, but it's
I
okay.
like
We're
to
not going
keep
to talk
that
about that
way
yet.
just because I
Don't worry, I got
you know,
something to
I
say.
when I especially when talking about issues around public health and healthcare, a decent amount of it is uh, not there's no bias towards it. So when I think in terms of you know of this and the problem that we're facing, uh, it's it's I don't want to be an alarmist, right? So nobody wants to sit here and say, "Oh my gosh, it's going to be catastrophic and we're all doomed." I don't feel that way, and I believe that if people take precautions, with the best one being to try and have minimize contact with people, that would be better. But here's the issue, and it's that because so few people have been tested, which I don't assign blame to that at all, and I don't think there's a need to, but because so few people have been tested, we don't actually honestly know what the actual rates of the disease are. So in a best case scenario, we could say, oh, lots more people have the disease, but only this number of people have died. So that means that the rates are lower. That would actually be a more positive spin on it. The other spin would be that there are lots of people who have the disease, and a lot more people obviously have the disease than we know. That is borne out by looking at the rates in Italy, looking at the rates in China. So we would have to assume, we would have to extrapolate from that data, which leads us to information. So based on that data, we would have to assume that there are more cases by virtue of the fact that people just haven't been tested. Also, the disease seems to have a process that is different in different people. So as most of us have heard, if you have a comorbidity, so if you have an underlying disease, cardiovascular disease is one, diabetes potentially is one. If you have an underlying disease and then you contract COVID-19, then your outcomes are not as positive. Additionally, if you are older, and the population we're looking at are people, let's say 80 and older, 60 and older, people have been floating that number around too. But definitely if you're in the category of 80 and older, your death rates are higher. So if we take the death rates we know to be true, if we take the disease rates we know to be true, then, and this is huge, and if we look at people who have had the disease and we look at their lung scans, which people seem to be having a decent amount of pretty severe lung damage post COVID-19 recovery, then I think what we're left with is a disease that seems to be more problematic in terms of outcomes for people, and also the damage that it causes to your respiratory system when you recover seems to also be different in nature than what we see in the flu that we know to be seasonal.
So, I hadn't even heard anything about that there was some permanent damage post recovery.
Yeah, unfortunately, it appears, and the first studies are coming out in China. It appears that is the case, that people upon lung scans have more damage than one would think. And you would imagine that with any sort of inflammatory process, right? I mean, most of us know if you have some sort of inflammatory process, it can cause adhesions and scar tissue. And anybody who's had any really bad lung disease, that can be the case, or any kind of disease where you have some sort of inflammatory process can create scar tissue. And upon scan for people who have recovered, they not only exhibit that, but they also exhibit long-lasting difficulty in terms of breathing.
Wow, I had no idea that had not been circulating in general circles.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a research nerd, so obviously I do a lot of reading in terms of the research that's out there. There's an interesting study from a group of professors at Princeton looking at the rates of survival of COVID-19, both in the air and on surfaces. And I'm happy to provide the link to that for anybody that's interested, because it's got some interesting rates of COVID-19 survival, not only in droplets, but also in other places.
Feel free to give us a little bit of that info if you have it off the top of your head, because I've heard like it lasts this long on metal, it doesn't last on here, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that caught my eye was that apparently uh, the virus, and again, the disease we know to be COVID-19, the virus itself is actually a SARS like virus. That the rates that it can live in the air are on average 2.7 hours. So that's not to say that that is how people are contracting it, but it's interesting to note that it does have survivability in the air.
Interesting. A little scary, but interesting.
I feel like I'm on CNN.
Right. Yeah, that's why I hesitate to say certain things just because it's not meant to scare people or to say, "Oh my gosh, this is horrendous." It's just, the research is happening so quickly that we don't necessarily know what some of this research means long term. And the other thing I just wanted to kind of leave people with is a virus. I would describe it as a virus is kind of like the old carbon copy papers, which younger people may not know what that is, but the old carbon copy papers or the game telephone. A virus mutates constantly, and what the virus looked like 4 months ago in Wuhan, China, obviously it doesn't look like that anymore because months ago it could not be transmitted from person to person. It was in animal form. So now we know that it can transmit from person to person. So by virtue of that, we know that it mutates. And that's what a virus does. And it continually mutates. So we have to be very vigilant because what this virus looks like now, it won't look like this reviewed articles and journals. But to the extent that you can fact check,
not in this league,
quadruple fact check, it behooves you to do that. I actually don't really post on Facebook, to be honest with you. If you go to my Facebook feed, the last time you'll see me posting on it is probably like 2018.
Oh man, you're not even sharing the events.
No. I mean,
has she been getting bonus chips?
I don't post things. I mean, I post that, and if you look at my feed, you'll see that people post things on my feed, but I don't go around talking about things. I'm not somebody that's gonna be out there jibber jabbering about what I think about this or what I think about that. It's just not in my nature. It's not how I function.
That's on Ryan.
So I'm very cautious about what I put into the universe, and if I put something into the universe, believe me, it's been fact checked many, 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 many times. So it's just, that's not my personality to just put things out in the stratosphere anyway. But it's particularly in this environment, I highly recommend that people try to fact check as much as possible because it only leads to making people very anxious. And if you're wrong, it's hard for people to trust you again in terms of information because, well, now you've steered them down a path that's not correct.
No, I totally agree.
Frank
with
says
that.
it, I believe it.
Hold on, guys. I think we might have hit a bump in the stream. I might have to fix this real fast. Although I do appreciate
I believe what he says too.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the league? I did not know this would be so serious. I can't really make light on this subject.
No. We're going to totally get into talking about the league.
Useless.
No.
Serious garbage. What am I supposed to say about this?
Well, you know what? I don't think. Were you here for Heather's initial? Did you hear her whole background?
When I first met her, she told me she was a lawyer for Harvard or something like that.
But tell them all of it, Heather, real fast while I get us back up and on.
Oh, the education?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, so I did my undergraduate work at Princeton University. I was a history major.
Didn't we all?
And then from there, I went to law school. So I went to St. John's Law. Then I went to Harvard for public health school, and my focus was law and public health. And actually these kind of things, outbreaks, pandemics, epidemics. And then I got my master's in education from Columbia, focusing on adolescent psychology and communications and multimedia.
Shit, why didn't you just go to Yale too while you were at it?
My sister went to Yale.
Of course.
I
mean,
couldn't.
I went to Easy
I
Wheel
wasn't
driving
allowed.
school,
That's great. Hold on, I might have to restart our whole stream. That's annoying.
Are we not online right now?
I think we just fell off.
Are you sure?
I'm not sure.
Ryan, how are you?
I'm okay.
How's
I'm a
your
little
family?
They're okay. They're screaming in the background somewhere. Because Tom gives me 5 minutes notice, so this is happening. Tells me nothing about it.
Pretty sure I posted this much earlier today.
I'm assuming he wants me to do my thing and make people laugh, and all you're doing is talk about serious shit. So I'm just sitting here like a fool listening.
I mean,
waiting
I'll
to talk
stay
about the
on
fun
and then like
stuff.
act the fool.
I have questions about the league that will entertain.
I mean, my big question is like, does it, you know, is there going to be a second act while this is happening? I mean, I have questions too. I'll be quiet and listen to your questions because I'm curious.
No, it's not
too.
about me. I'm just being co-host and interject, but I have questions to ask. But Tom's just like, oh, tell us more about being on CNN.
Oh, we are still live. We are still live, guys.
Oh, great. You need to address your audience. They don't want to hear about this virus for now. Have you not met these players?
All right,
They're all tuned out.
All right, let's start talking. We're on, but a lot of echoes. Who's giving them the echoes?
You.
I hope not me.
It's you. You're
it
the
me?
echo.
Probably.
Yeah.
Is it me?
So we gotta hit. No, it's not you. It's him. This is riveting.
Is this better? Okay, go ahead, Ryan. You can ask Heather a question. Go.
Is anyone actually watching?
We are.
Yes,
It's
sir.
just
There are a
it's the
few
three of us.
watching.
Table for three. All right, I'm just gonna ask you some questions about the league and just answer. Don't be afraid of who you hurt and who you don't hurt. Who's the best player?
That's a hard question. No, I'm not
No,
being
it's not.
funny. That's a hard question because I guess I'd have to answer more like if I'm playing and person X sits down, who am I like, oh gosh, it's gonna be tough. So I guess I'll
Sure.
answer it that way. Who do I get anxious about when they sit down to play? Okay, the person who knocks me out the most is Stanley. He got me
Stanley.
one night. Stanley and Stretch were the two. Stanley, who I love dearly, I flopped a.
Oh, okay. I have more questions. Let's just say, who's the best player? You're going with Stanley.
She's gonna be too nice.
I know. Then she's not gonna want to answer this. Yeah, these questions aren't gonna be for you. Because the next one's who's the worst player? Who's the worst player?
Who's the worst player?
Answer. Have the balls and
Me.
answer. Oh,
Me.
come on. God. So best players, Stanley or Stretch.
I'm the worst.
Worst
You can
players.
get 10 people to tell you that.
Okay.
I'm
Most
gonna give you a better
entertaining.
one.
Who's the most entertaining? You know what? Actually, you are highly entertaining.
Obviously.
I'm only
but
sad that I haven't been at a table with you more, but when I get knocked out, which is not infrequent, I will like watch you in action. I wish you played more actually.
thank you.
I
Appreciate
do.
that.
No, I'm
mean,
serious.
have to
I
be good at
do.
something,
You're
right?
hilarious. You're very
Thank you.
funny, but you're a very nice person. So I like
Sometimes.
people who are entertaining and they're funny, but they're kind. And you can tell that about you. You're not mean spirited. You're not.
I'm just gonna
a
interject
jerk
real
to
fast.
people.
DJ Stanley Styles
You
is
are.
in the
I really
building
like it
watching.
when you play in the league. I wish you played more.
Thank you. I mean, if I ditch
very
the kids
welcome.
and get a divorce, I'll be there.
That's pretty funny.
I think these echoes might be coming from Ryan.
It's you. I have brand new iPhone 11 headset.
Well, just to mention Stanley Styles, we're actually going to try and have him on as well because he's been out of the country and he's just returning back yesterday or today.
Yeah, he has. Oh my gosh, there's one time like he knocked me out and I legit started rolling around on the table like I did. I did. The table held me up, though. I was impressed. Oops. Did I lose you guys? Okay, you
Sorry,
still
no, I'm here. I was gonna say we're getting a little bit of chatter. They wanted to know your opinion on RJ.
RJ's my best dealer. Every time RJ deals to me, I get to the. Every time he's dealt to me, I got to the final table. I kid you not. I kid you not.
You're killing me.
Every time. Yeah. Did you not?
Just eat bats. Don't eat bats is what he says.
Bats. Don't eat bats.
I'm
That
being
was his
told
advice to
Ryan
me. Don't
and
eat
Tom
bats and I
Echo.
won't get sick.
That was his advice to me. Don't eat bats and I won't get sick.
Yeah, but I can't even
Oh, I
make
just
it
heard
up.
my
Every
echo.
time he's dealt to me, I've gotten to the final table.
Well, he's such a great dealer.
Well, he's such a great dealer.
We're gonna have RJ on as a guest.
We're gonna
I
have
promise.
RJ on as a guest. I promise.
I would love that
I would
more than
love that.
anything.
More than
I'm
anything.
definitely gonna put RJ on as a guest because I think people want to get to know him a little more. I think I need to put maybe you and Tim Moulton in a debate, Ryan.
Oh,
stand a
by
chance.
the way, Tim
Wouldn't stand a
Moulton, I
chance.
say this
Wouldn't
all the
stand a chance.
time. Tim has saved me like at least 30 to 45 minutes on my commute to teach, like every day, because he told me a shortcut how to get to work, and he legit has like saved me. So I'm forever indebted to him.
He's a good dude,
for-
just a Republican. So
We do want to thank him and all the other truck drivers out there, keeping the world moving.
Yeah, I mean they're doing.
Fuck.
Let me tell you something. The people on the front line are the truck drivers, the people working in the supermarkets, obviously the nurses and doctors. But I mean, just think what this would look like. Think about what this would look like if there were no truck drivers. It would be beyond catastrophic. So yes, people like Tim are. They're. I mean.
Y'all
it would
know I'm a
be-
truck driver,
it would
right?
be
Shit.
horrendous without him.
Shit.
Question is, Ryan, what do you deliver? Do you deliver toilet paper? Because that's what we need to know.
No, I don't.
No, I don't.
Building products.
Building products.
So I'm gonna open this forum up to all of our Down to the Felt players too. If there's something you want to know about Heather or a question for Heather, feel free to shoot that out as I'm watching the YouTube stream as well. And Heather, who do you think is the loudest player in the league? Go.
I mean, I'm kind of maybe go with me again. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed by
the loudest
that.
laugh for sure.
But I've tried to. I feel like I've been quieter recently, and I haven't actually been there a lot over the last couple of months, just because of work stuff, and then kind of this happened. So I haven't been around very much lately. So I'm gonna.
So being in the center of it all, right, and specializing in what you do, have you isolated severely or no? Or
Oh, here we go.
So it's interesting. So because of what I do, I'm an academic, right? So, fortunately, I'm not on the front lines in the same way that, nurses and doctors are. So I have that. I do, like I mentioned, run a nonprofit. So that actually would have had more contact with people that potentially could have been exposed, but we basically stopped our programming about 2 weeks ago. We're still doing webinars and we're still doing online training for the students, but in terms of face-to-face contact, we put a halt on that. I mean, obviously because of what I do and my work, I probably decided to do that earlier than other people or other organizations might have. Out of my background and what I do. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm not kidding. The people that I would say are the most on the front line are people that are working at supermarkets. I mean, it's unbelievable what they're dealing with. It really is to me. So if you're out there and you work at a supermarket, my hat is off to you because you're kind of seeing it all. And so I feel for them. They're doing really amazing work. They really are.
No, absolutely. What about you, Ryan? What have you been doing? Have you been self-contained and isolating yourself with you and your
I
children?
work every single damn day. People are still putting up buildings, so I'm still at construction sites all day.
Mm-hmm.
How about
Tom,
Jen?
I should say, by the way,
Jen's working
I've
from home.
because of my teaching, I don't teach in front of students anymore. So all of my teaching now is remote or online, which is the way that 90+% of schools have gone. So today I taught 3 classes, but I taught them all online. So yeah, the schools have gone that way.
Absolutely. Beanish is in the chat, and she's saying, we need to do something to try and support all these bars, bartenders, all the people that are really getting crushed in this economy. I'm not going to lie, our business has almost halted outside of our retail aspects.
Yeah, and musicians, and actors and actresses and people who who are backup dancers, and people who rely on other people who are not working because there's no concerts, and the vendors at basketball games. I mean, none of these people are working, so we're going to have to collectively become very creative as a community in order to support these individuals because they deserve it, and we owe it to them. We owe it to them as a society. I think we do.
No, I absolutely agree. I feel like that's a big thing is going to be the economic ripple after all this really settles down.
Right, and it's gonna take a while for things to get ramped back up. I mean, even something like Broadway, where people will not have done their shows for months. You don't just go back on Broadway and start, singing Hamilton. So it's gonna take, and I'm a huge sports fan. I'm a huge football, baseball, basketball. I'm a huge
Brady.
sports fan, and so my thought is for like a lot of these teams, what are they gonna do? I mean, well, I'm a Jets fan, so I guess it doesn't matter.
What do you think about Brady to the Bucks, Heather? That's the question.
Yeah, it's a mess. But for a lot of these teams, getting back up to speed, it's gonna be challenging. So it's tough. I didn't mention that, I guess, Tom. I'm a huge sports fan, so.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I've been
about
running
you
my
either.
own
That's
fantasy football league for like a long time.
I had no idea that you would be a stat rat.
Oh yeah, no. My team's called the Baltimore Bandits, and I'm the manager of my league, and I've been running it for years and years and years. So yeah, I'm a huge stats person, huge football person. Yep.
Super interesting. Ryan, what's your opinion on Brady to the Bucks?
Best day of my life. I was so happy. I'm still happy. I went to work with a smile.
Yeah.
I don't smile. I was so happy
Yep.
today. Now we're going to get Gurley too, I think. We're going to be so good. And now, you know what's going to happen now? Danilo luck? I'm going to die before freaking September. I'm never going to see Brady play.
Best day of your life. You have 2 kids that were born at a wedding.
Well, Brady wasn't there for either one of those. He was up here, though.
That's pretty funny.
Perfect spiral.
Just kidding. I love my son.
Oh man, so how long do you think before we get back to poker, guys? I feel like we're gonna be doing this nightly. I want to keep everybody engaged, but I feel like poker might be a couple weeks out at least, maybe a month.
Don't do it.
I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but I think it's gonna be
May.
at the earliest. Yeah, I do. And the problem with something like this, and we have, not to go back to 1918 flu, but we have that as an example because remember, these things don't go in just sort of like a linear fashion. You can have waves. And so the 1918 flu was a multi-year process where there were waves of the outbreaks that happened over time. So, I mean, I think we should all pay very close attention to China because I think everybody's like, oh, great, it's over. They can go back to normal. Just keep an eye on places like China and Italy because hopefully it is over for them. But these things tend to have
Being a stat
waves.
person, do you think we're getting
And
all
so-
the information?
I didn't hear that, Tom.
I was saying, being a stat person, and because we do have to watch them to see what happens here, do you think we're getting the full information from over there? I know a lot of conspiracy people are saying this and
Oh,
that.
stop.
I think the information issue is more just how quickly they can gather it. I don't know that it's, I don't know that it's necessarily, oh, they're intentionally not giving us information. I think we can sort of have our thoughts about that. But we're not getting all the information in the United States. I mean, we don't know the full picture here. So if we don't know the full picture here and we'd like to know it, then I would say most assuredly we don't know the full picture for any other country because they don't necessarily know the full picture.
I got a quick question. Jason Keogh chimed in. He was asking, would there be any suggestions for extra precautionary measures with supermarket workers or frontline type workers as this is going on? Like, is there something you would recommend?
So my thought is I think everybody was talking about masks, and the reason why masks are not a great idea for people who don't have the disease, and I chalk it up to one thing. When you put a mask on, you actually have to put it on and you use your hands to put it on. And then masks
Sorry, guys,
are
I gotta
not
go. I
comfortable
got a
to
situation.
wear. Oh, okay.
All right,
Alright.
I'm still here with you, don't worry.
Okay. As you wear masks, I mean, I just did it. You sort of like fiddle with your face. I washed my hands, by the way, before I started this. So, but as you wear a mask, you do this, right? So you fiddle with your face. You fiddle with your face, and you push the mask up and so forth. And if you're not being super diligent regarding washing your hands every time you do that, then there's a decent amount of chance that as you're fiddling with the mask that you put on, you could infect yourself by virtue of just touching the mask. So that's why, of the many reasons that it is recommended for people not to wear masks, it's because it's not necessarily safeguarding you. You can infect yourself by putting it on, and other people need them, right? I mean, unless you're wearing some sort of like industrial strength mask they're using in the hospital, it's they're gonna be the problems that I mentioned. Hand washing and distancing are the two best things that somebody who works in a supermarket can do. Now that is, really hard if you're working in a supermarket to try and distance yourself from the customers because they're right there. So that's challenging, but those are two things as much as you can that you would want to try to do. And again, I would just say being vigilant about educating yourself regarding what's going on because things change rapidly. I mean, I think I mentioned before, I'm a public health lawyer, and so one of the things that I'm super interested in are public health laws. And there's a old-timey case called Jacobson v. Massachusetts, which is a 1897 case. This guy named Jacobson was living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and didn't want to get the smallpox vaccination. And then the good people of Cambridge said, you got to get it. He didn't get it. And then he was fined for not getting it. But that case stands for something called police power, which is the intersection of civil liberties as it relates to public health. So that's a specific interest of mine, is that. And so when we think about some of the measures we're talking about now, especially in New York, with things like sheltering in place and other measures, those are public health laws. And so I would also highly recommend that people keep a close eye on those and understand that at the state level, the government does have the right to institute certain things that will protect the public from people who are not so interested in protecting the public, and also protecting people from themselves and their poor decisions, which you would like to think that people wouldn't make poor decisions in these kinds of situations, but unfortunately, sometimes people can.
I think that's a big thing. I feel like I got a lot of blowback for shutting down earlier on the spectrum than a lot of other things have. But I feel like better safe than sorry with this, especially in what we do.
I saluted you. And I did, because again, the thing that's a little unsettling about COVID-19 is that there's probably a decent amount of people who are infected and are not exhibiting obvious signs of the infection. So that then makes things really difficult for somebody like yourself who's running a business if you're not really sure whether people can have the disease and yet it's not manifesting in the way that we have been told it should manifest and could potentially spread the disease to other people. And so that's disturbing. And so I applaud you because that took a lot of courage to make a decision like that. I'm sure it was extremely difficult, and I'm sure you got a lot of flack for that. But again, I would say that decision certainly safeguarded people.
I think it's best
And
for
you need to be
everybody.
commended.
Yeah. I think it was a better decision. Like you were saying, sometimes the masses don't make the best decision. So sometimes you have to enforce some sort of rules.
Right, and I think it's a new world, and I think as a country, we're very used to doing what we would like to do, and so it's disconcerting when we're told that we can't, and it takes a minute for us to catch up with the fact that there's certain things we can't do. And while we're catching up, sometimes we need people to say, well, we're going to put a pause while you can wrap your head around what is now happening. But we need those people, and I would put you in that camp. And so, bravo to you.
I appreciate that. I mean, bravo to all of you guys. I feel like we're gonna weather this storm together, just from different spots, for the most part, right? I feel like that's the key.
Right. Absolutely. And I think we can get creative regarding how we are all together. I know it feels disconcerting to think things aren't the way they were, but if we can be creative about what this will look like, we might actually come up with some interesting other solutions that we might keep. And
Absolutely.
things where we say, oh, that's great. I'm glad that we did that. And let's do that into the future. So I think, as painful as this is, it behooves us to look at this somewhat as an opportunity, both to help people, and I know you're doing that. And so, again, that's beautiful and it's wonderful. So to help other people, to help our fellow players, and then also to think about creative ways that we can be with each other and continue to do
Yeah,
this
prosper
thing
and
called.
socialize, 'cause that's really what we're about, right?
Right, exactly.
So yeah, I think it's important, and just to let everybody know that if anybody wants to try and get on this wagon of trying just to help others, we just want to know if anybody's trapped in the house, needs a hand. We're trying to organize those that can be organized and help others out. And then we also want to try and keep our social interaction up. So we're going to try and do this type of a thing where we get to interact or engage or meet new players or learn more about players. I feel like I learned a ton about you today, for sure. I had no idea. I had no idea all of this. So it's fun.
Yeah, I don't jabber about it so much, you know. I think one of the things I actually like about our league is you can go there and just be, you know, whoever,
Yeah, have a good
and
time.
just play and meet people. And I mean, I would say I can probably count on like two fingers the number of times people actually asked me, you know, what I do, or you know what my life is, and I like that. Actually, I like that's cool that I can do something that I enjoy and kind of just be in that environment with people I really like. And I really like the people in our league a lot. I think they're lovely people. They're very kind. People have shown me kindnesses when they didn't realize that I needed to be shown kindness. And for that, I'm forever grateful.
And
And
we
so we have a
appreciate you for
wonderful
that.
league with a wonderful group of people. And I know that once we get through this, we'll be better because of it. So I'm grateful to everybody, and I miss everybody a lot, but we'll see each other again for sure.
Absolutely.
I'm sure of that. And one other thing I just wanted to say was, you know, you don't there's lots of ways you can help people. A nice kind thing you can do, and it doesn't expose you to danger, is to text a neighbor or to call a friend and just see how people are doing. And especially for people who are older, who probably are feeling very isolated now, to do that is a wonderful thing. And so it doesn't take a lot out of our lives, especially since a lot of us are at home right now, to do that. And so I encourage everybody, that's one of the kindest things you can do. And it's a beautiful thing, and people really appreciate it.
I appreciate that. I think that's a very good tip. I agree. I think we definitely do need to reach out and touch base with like people that we aren't talking to enough. This gives us that moment. It gives it a little bit more of a zen moment, right? We're able to be in the moment as opposed to caught up in the daily grind.
Yes, right, exactly, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of positives come of this. I agree. I feel like people can't. It's what you focus on. So I feel like this is going to be a good thing overall. Just a speed bump and something to talk about for years to come, right? Or something to
That's,
study
I
for
mean,
hundreds of years
can you
to come.
imagine? We're gonna be a generation be like, remember back in 2020?
Right?
And people say like that didn't really happen. Like, yeah, it really did.
That's the truth. So much. Is there anything else you want to parting wise? I appreciate you giving us so much of your time tonight for us to get to know you.
I appreciate again you asking me to do this, and I again can't overemphasize how meaningful everyone is to me. I miss them. I miss you, and I believe that we'll in some form be together again very soon. And I think we should be creative about thinking about what that looks like. And I'm happy to extend myself to anybody that has questions or concerns. I'm doing a bunch of webinars. I'm actually doing one on Friday and another one Monday, so I'm happy to give you the information about that. And so if
Yeah, I'd love for
anybody
you to
has
put those
family
links up.
members or friends and they feel like, oh, my family members aren't quite getting it, can you talk to them or send them some resources? I'm happy to facilitate that. So however I can be of assistance, if that would be helpful, I'm happy to do that. And I think the world of you, Tom, and I am really grateful that I had the chance to do this. I'm really grateful to you. You've brought a lot of joy to people's lives. You've done to me, and I will be forever grateful to you. I really will.
I truly appreciate that. That's super touching. And that's what makes all of it worth it. I feel like beyond the business aspects of it all, I feel like that's really what it's about. And I appreciate you. I appreciate
you.
you and all the people like you and everybody that can, hear their story. And I feel like that's one of the best things that's going to come of this for me is that we'll get to know some of the people that we see every day a little bit more intimately and like know more of their background, their story, where they come from, what they've done. And I really appreciate yours. It's super interesting.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you for being with us. And thank you for taking your time out to have this discussion with us today.
My pleasure. It was a real treat. It was a real joy.
Thank you so much, Heather. And we'll definitely see you shortly and keep you involved and keep you in the loop. And I'm sure I'll be texting you with all questions too. And then
Bring it on. I'm here for you.
I appreciate that. Thank you guys. We're going to sign out tonight, and we appreciate everybody tuning into our first player profile. And I feel honored to have Heather as our first player profile. So we'll talk to you more in the forums, and we will see you tomorrow night around 8 p.m. with a new player.
Bye.
Thank you, Heather. Thanks so much. Have a great
Bye.
night. Be safe. Wash your hands.
You too. You too. Wash your hands.
Don't touch your face. Talk to you soon.
Don't touch your face.
Bye-bye. Have a great one.
Bye.